for the first 10 years of my recovery, it was just about survival, right? It was just about survival. But now it's like, okay, I've survived a lot of things. And you and I, we've survived heart issues. We've survived some pretty horrific health issues in recovery too, right? And so I'm on the other side of that, and I'm done just surviving. I'm ready to thrive. And so this practice of intentionality, and really, my boss, Dan, says you can't win your life if you can't win your day. Right. And so, and if you, and we live in a world right now that is so distracting. Everything is a 10-second swipe in any direction. Right. And I'm not just talking about dating anymore. I'm talking about how we consume content. I mean, everything has gone to this TikTok swipe, swipe, swipe mentality. Right.
Welcome to Amy Liz Harrison's podcast, Eternally Amy, a mum of eight's journey from jail to joy, a Gen Xer who overcame her struggle with alcohol to become a best-selling author and mental health advocate. She shares stories of hope and offers ideas for others struggling with mental health challenges. One thing is for sure, you'll leave with something to chew on. And now, here's your host, Amy Liz Harrison.
Hey, greetings, compadres. So guess what? It's another episode of the Boozeless Book Club. And today, you got Alysse, Bryson, and me together again in perfect harmony. What can I say? I was going to say something else, and then I couldn't figure out. I was like, no, I'm just going to go with perfect harmony. So like, whatever. P.S. worthy of note, before I get started, I have to share with you, Alysse, that I am currently rewatching the show Different Strokes, and I am on season 4. I didn't know there were quite that many seasons of Different Strokes.
How many seasons are there, Amy?
Like a lot more than I thought. And so we just got to the point where Philip married Maggie. So Dixie Carter comes into the show, just a son. And so, yeah, that's what my nights are consisting of currently. But, you know, we make my way basically through the reruns of the 80s, and I'm not mad at it at all. It's been so fun.
Well, you guys are real Nick at Night lovers at your house, real Nick at Night supporters.
It turns out we are indeed. And so,
well, I want to let you know that yesterday, I guess I was the last person to get the memo, but it was just yesterday that I watched the Wham documentary that you apparently have watched 18 times since it came out last week.
Yes. Well, I'm glad that you've watched it, because now we can add that into our repertoire of things to discuss, because we're always lacking in items to discuss. Just kidding. But that is interesting, and I can briefly weave that in as well, also in association with this book. But I don't want to lose sight of this book before I start even talking about it, which would be classic and very on brand for me. So this past month, what we read was Stash. So Stash is by Laura Cathcart Robbins, and it was named the best memoir of 2023. And in the vein of Somebody's Daughter, this wild, vivid addiction memoir from the host of the podcast, quote, "the only one in the room," unquote, will inspire, awe, entertain, educate, and help so many readers with a journey to sobriety and self-love amidst privilege and racism. So here's the blurb. After years of hiding her addiction from everyone, stockpiling pills in her Louboutins, and did I say that right? I've never known how to say that brand.
You did a good job.
We're going to go with that. And elaborately scheduling her withdrawals between PTA meetings, baby showers, and tennis matches, Laura Cathcart Robbins is running out of places to hide. She has learned the hard way that even her high-profile marriage and Hollywood lifestyle can't protect her from the pain she's keeping bottled up inside. Facing divorce, the possibility of a grueling custody battle, and the insistent voice of internalized racism that nags at her as a Black woman in a startleringly white world, Laura wonders just how much more she can take. Now, With courageous and candid openness, she reveals how she started the long journey towards sobriety, unexpectedly found new love, and dismantled the wall she had built around herself brick by brick. With its raw, finely crafted, and engaging prose, Stash is emotionally riveting. It's ushering in a new way for us to talk and read about the paradoxes of addiction, race, family, class, and gender. Wow.
Woo!
I mean, that was a fire hose. But I want to start out by saying this. So first of all, Alysse is the one who recommended this book or suggested that we read it. I guess I
Yeah,
should.
because the cover. I mean, look at how cute this cover is.
I'm
It's
obsessed with the
it's
cover,
pink. It's covered in pills. Like
right?
this is like right up our love language. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, I do buy books based off the cover. 100%. I'm that person. And now I'm happy to report that the inside of the book just as good as the outside of the book. But
Oh.
this is why we ended up with this book, is because I was just like, that's super cute. I gotta know what's inside.
Okay, so agree. And also on the cover, I must say the whole concept of it looking like it is a Pepto-Bismol spill, perhaps, with good and plenties all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here
Mm-hmm.
for it.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. And I
Those
started
do
reading
kind of look like Good and Plenty's, don't they?
totally.
And I like Good and Plenty's. I'm not a big black licorice or licorice girl in general, but once in a while, a Good and Plenty,
You
it's
like it.
good. I like a Good and Plenty once in a while. Mm-hmm.
I've never been a fan.
Nope,
Yeah, I wish, but there are a
can't get on the
few
board.
I can't get on the board. That and also, do you remember those Necco wafers? I'm
Oh
out.
yeah,
I
oh
can't,
yeah.
those are like chalky, like Metamucil.
Oh
I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah. I don't like them either. Yeah. I'm
Not a
with you
fan.
on those. But I once in a while I can Good and Plenty, not very often. And I mean, maybe I should try them more often because I can never I won't eat the whole box like I will like Reese's Pieces. Forget about it. Like that box is mine and I'm not sharing. But a Good and Plenty box, like I'm totally happy to share because I only just want a few, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, a few of them are good and they are plenty. So
Ah,
there you go. Right?
thank you, folks. Can you guys tell that Amy and I have been taking an improv class? Is it
Mm-hmm.
paying off yet? I think it's paying
I
off.
can tell.
By
Mm-hmm.
the way, I did get a notification that the class is expiring tomorrow. So we have big decisions to make about if we need to. We didn't get all the way through it, so we need to. But we can probably talk about that another time. But I'm just putting that out
Tomorrow.
there.
Are
Yeah.
we funny enough to quit now is what I need to know. We can talk about it later, as
Oh,
you
we
said.
can talk about it later.
All right. So, first of all, I have to say thank you for choosing this book, Alysse, or recommending it. I was obsessed with it. I have
It was
not
a great read. Great read.
such a good read, and I have not felt that way about a book, if I'm being totally honest, for a long time. And I could not, I'm going to say I couldn't put it down, but I couldn't stop listening to it because I
Mhm.
did the audiobook version. I was captivated by the way that she wrote. I was captivated, of course, by the Hollywood aspect
Of
because,
course.
right, duh.
Yeah.
And I thought she was so the book is divided up into two parts, basically, and it's
Mhm.
before and after sobriety or getting sober and then her life in sobriety. So the first part, which was all about her addiction and her background, that was, I mean, it was captivating to me. I could not stop listening, as I said, and I was just intertwined in her story. Everything, as somebody who refers to herself as an alcoholic in recovery, I totally could picture everything she was saying. I didn't have a pill addiction, but of course, everything she said translated to alcohol for me.
Mhm.
And I was right there with her.
Mhm.
And all of her little sneaky little tactics and all of the things she discussed, I was like, yep, did that. Oh, that's a good idea. Oh, wouldn't have thought of that. Yep, did that. So, of course, I want to know what your thoughts are.
I felt the same way. I can't say that I had a pill problem, but I definitely abused pills. But I mean, alcohol was really my thing, even though I used a lot of other things, other substances throughout my using career in general. Alcohol was really what took me down. But I have found, and this is, you know this, and we've heard this a million times, but when listening to other people share their stories, it's really important to listen for the similarities versus the differences. And so, yes, the difference in this case might be pills versus alcohol, but what the similarity is, the thought about it and the feelings that she had and the hiding and the secrecy and the lies, that was all the same. I was captivated at her efforts at trying to pack for rehab and the shenanigans she was trying to pills in her tampons. Now that's pretty clever. That's
It
pretty
was.
clever. That's pretty clever. But then I don't want to give it away. See, this is the hard thing about having a book
I
club, Amy.
know.
How do we talk about the book without giving it away? Because I want people to experience this book and have the same surprises. So it's like I almost said something and I don't want to say anything, but I thought it was great. I, of course, had to look up who she is in real life so I could figure out who her husband was because, she kept kind of referring to him as this Hollywood executive. But I'm like, what does that mean? I don't know what that means.
Yeah. Yeah, I was doing the same thing, and I'm with you. I struggle with that in general with book club is I find it difficult to talk about it without talking about it too much and
Mm-hmm.
giving all the spoiler alerts away. But I can say that, she charted some territory that I don't know. I'll say it this way. When I wrote Eternally Expecting, after I felt like it was enough drunkalog and then enough about rehab and then enough about my sober life or the beginnings of my sober life, I just quit. I didn't go into any more detail, and that's fine. It's totally okay. But she told like everything from soup to nuts, and it wasn't boring. Like it
Was
wasn't
not
too
boring.
much. You know what I'm saying? And I don't know exactly how she did that, but I really was compelled to like think about how she went about that because I think at a certain point I got sick of myself when I when I was writing Eternally Expecting. I was like, okay, yeah, and then yeah, 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 yeah. I just was sort of done with my own story. And so I needed, my editor's help to kind of pull out of me the things that maybe weren't as necessary. But I felt like nothing in her story was too much. I didn't feel like, oh, she should have scrapped this, that, and the other thing because I felt she did a really good job of building onto the next whatever was coming down the road. And I was just super impressed by that and hashtag not bored by it. And I was very much hoping, I was left hoping at the end of the book that maybe there was more, or maybe she's going to write something else someday, or, maybe it'll take a turn and, she'll do a whole fiction addiction series, as you coined a new term that I haven't heard before, fiction addiction. But I very much enjoyed it and would recommend this wholeheartedly to anybody to read. I was very moved by it, and I was also super entertained. Totally felt like laughing out loud multiple times. Just didn't because sometimes I was in the presence of others and it would have been strange. But I loved it.
I loved that the woman that wrote this is a person of color because
Yep.
I feel like that population in the recovery community is grossly underrepresented. That being said, I am not a person of color, obviously, and I still identified with so much of this story. And so that's what I love about this story is that the story is so relatable. Potentially someone who, I mean, I don't have the same amount of privilege that she has, potentially someone reading the book that does not have any privilege or access to things may not relate as closely. But I don't know. I think there was so much of her story that was so relatable as a mom, right? As a mom, and the feelings she had around her kids and being so torn, like wanting to spend time with them, but also really just wanting to go and check out mentally. Like, I really understood that.
Totally. And what you said about the privilege part, yeah, that was uh, she comes from such an interesting viewpoint and life.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think that in a lot of ways, her experience that she shared was what I pulled from what she shared about it, seeing as I also am not a woman of color. I pulled out of it, though, that she felt different. She felt different, and I could immediately relate that to my life and the ways that I have felt different,
Mm-hmm.
particularly in my addiction. And I remember arriving at rehab and just going, I don't, nobody else around here has my life or gets who I am or has had my same experiences. I'm all alone. If you had only ... if you understood blah, 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 if you had my blank, you would drink too. I remember having all of those feelings. So I'm not trying to like sort of normalize or compare my experience to her experience, like as in saying same, but I could totally relate to those threads of feeling different in my own way, in my own circumstance.
Mm-hmm.
And so I felt that she did a really good job of making herself relatable even to people who didn't maybe have some of those same circumstances. And I thought that, it takes talent, that takes skill to be able to convey that in a particular way. And I thought she did such a good job at that. And yeah, the mom stuff. And I mean, it totally reminded me of, I always get this name wrong, but there was a mini series, Nicole Kidman and Reese Witherspoon, and it was those ladies in Monterey. I
Oh,
want,
yeah.
I want to call it Pretty Little Liars. That's not it. It's
No,
like Big Little Lies or
Big Little
Little,
Lies.
is that
Big
it?
Little Lies. Yeah, Big Little Lies.
But
Yeah, it had those vibes. It had those
right?
vibes. I could picture that. Yeah.
I just was picturing all of this, and yeah, it kept reminding me of that for some reason. But I kept thinking too, what a different life she led as opposed to what it could have been, which I know that sounds like, well, sort of sliding doors Gwyneth Paltrow, like of course she would have led a different life somewhere else, but I thought that she comes from a unique perspective that
Mhm.
isn't shared by many. And so that's particularly why I thought it was such a talent of hers to be able to explain that uniqueness and make it relatable at the same
Mhm.
time.
Well, even, and this is fast forwarding a little bit, but like she goes to treatment. There's a lot of detail about what happens while she's in treatment. We can get into that, not get into that. But like the realness of when she was getting out of treatment and going back home, like she was already planning on using before she even left treatment, which is, as we know, so common, right? So common that people like drink or use like on their way home from rehab, right?
Yours truly. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So I thought that was incredibly relatable.
Yep.
And, there was nothing glamorous about the treatment stay. Now, she might have even stayed in a rather posh treatment facility. It sounds like it was hot. Was it in Arizona or something?
Yes.
Probably at at a not ideal time of year. But there's nothing, I don't care how posh a treatment center is, there's nothing cool about treatment, like going to treatment. Like it's rough. It is rough going. Everybody there, it's rough going. Yeah, I always joke with my parents, the next time I go to treatment, I'm going to go to a real fancy one like Malibu or, the one where the celebs hang out. I'm going to go to that one. And they never think that joke's funny. Like never. They never think,
Really?
yeah.
Huh.
Apparently it's too soon.
Mm-hmm. Too soon.
Mm-hmm.
That's so funny. That is so funny. Yeah. I thought she was very smart to plan a place like that to go to treatment. I think she probably was hoping she wouldn't want to flee, which rehab, shockingly, has the ability to do to one, regardless of where you are. It's just like
Mm-hmm.
that whole, like, you took away my safety blanket, kind of
Mm-hmm.
feeling. And so, but I thought it was funny, she lands in the private plane and all of the stuff. And just then you get to rehab and you realize, oh, this is the great equalizer. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I got no status here. I have no VIP next to my name. I got nothing. And I love that. I thought she was really cute the way she described that. So, but yeah, even the people she met in rehab, and I love that you mentioned the tampons. That was cracking me up because yeah, I remember, I mean, they didn't search, well, I'm gonna tell you they didn't search my bags like that, but let's face it, I don't really know. I was completely hammered, and so I could actually not be telling the truth on that. I just don't remember it. There we go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So I too was impressed by her ingenuity and loved her details of who she met there. And I just remember meeting some of the most interesting, unique characters at rehab and had no idea what a gift that was for me,
Oh, you never forget the friends you meet in treatment.
right?
Yeah, definitely not. Definitely characters.
Yeah. So I thought that was really amazing. And then I have to touch on when she got back from treatment. Her life, as happens, just resumed in full swing, right?
Mm-hmm.
She had suddenly all of her commitments waiting for her. She had her kids to reacquaint herself with, and she had missed them terribly. And she had this, as it mentions in the blurb, this custody battle going on and all this stuff. And I thought it was fascinating. Many of us who start going to a 12-step fellowship, which is what she does, I'm giving that part away, sorry, but we don't intend to necessarily stay.
Mm-mm.
Maybe we just want to kind of get the courts off of our back or just kind of make ourselves look like we're doing the things. And I just, I find it fascinating the way, yeah, no, she didn't intend to stay either. And it sounds like she did, or at least for a period of time. And it's funny how when you actually devote yourself to something, I mean, you start getting results, whatever that may be that you're devoting yourself to. It is possible to actually sort of convert oneself, even if you didn't intend to do it, And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I thought that was neat. And all of the stuff that she had to do in relation to prove herself a good mom, quote unquote, as advised by her lawyer. And yeah, it's just a lot to handle when you're first getting sober. And at the same time, who gets to go home and not do anything? So, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I feel like, I mean, this book, it was good, but it was entertaining, right? I could
Uh,
see this playing out as a movie or a
Yep.
TV series, most certainly.
Yep.
Do we talk about the treatment center romance? I don't know. How much can we give away? Like,
Hmm.
that
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is a bad idea. But I also like, you know, treatment romances are very common for lots of different reasons. But I will say, I did some research, and as far as I can tell, it looks like they are still together.
I mean, you never know, right? You just don't know. And so, I guess I mean, I had the same reaction. I was like, oh, sister, don't, no.
Yeah, don't do it. Don't do it, girl. Bad
You're just,
idea. That's a
yeah.
bad idea.
And you're just going to complicate everything. And that's why they tell you to wait a year and blah, de, blah. Like I was going through all the old tapes, and there are a reason why, lots of reasons why people recommend that and not to get involved in treatment, romances. Then I thought, well, I guess it's another learning opportunity, right? It's another
Mhm.
place for growth. I can tell you that where I went to treatment, I'm pretty sure there were some babies conceived in the restroom that we all used because there was only one and there was constantly a line and there was a lot of romance budding between some of the younger folks.
I have to just take us on a little bit of a rabbit hole right now because
Can't wait.
I am reading another book right now, and it is about Marty Mann, the first
Oh,
female of Alcoholics Anonymous.
yeah. Yep.
We never hear of her. We only hear of Dr. Bob and Bill W., but she was the first woman AAer. And it's a very thick, it's a very, very thick memoir. But well, she didn't write it. Somebody else wrote it about her. I think it came out like in 2000 or something like that.
Okay.
But I did not know this. Maybe you knew this, but I did not know this. But the third tradition of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is that the only require for membership is a desire to stop drinking, right? Did you know that that tradition came into place only because there was a fight because there was a gentleman who wanted to come. He was definitely an alcoholic, but he was gay. And so there was a controversy in this early AA meeting about if they should let him in or not, because they were afraid of what could happen, because they'd already seen what was happening with women. Oh, not the women coming in with the alcoholic men and making that so dramatic. What would happen when a gay man comes in, right? But then it was decided that we couldn't exclude anybody. And so that the only requirement for membership was a desire to stop drinking. So that actually came, and apparently many people got it on Dr. Bob's, like, in his patient room, on his patient bed.
Wow.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Salacious.
So salacious. And I don't know. I mean, hopefully Dr. Bob was not involved with that beyond,
No,
yeah,
no, just other
no
than it being
malpractice.
his room, no
No
malpractice that I could
malpractice.
tell. But this Marty Mann, I have to tell you, I'm pretty impressed with what I've read about her so far and her career. I mean, just she definitely came from privilege, had a lot of access, did a lot of traveling, had a big career, then lost it all to booze, and then puts it back together. But yes, I was yes, just talking about people getting it on in early recovery. That is, it's a real situation. It's a real thing.
It's a real thing. So funny you should bring up that book. I just recently watched the Bill W. documentary. That's the
Mm-hmm.
newer one, but
Uh-huh.
it's not really new because apparently
Like
an entire,
2011 or 12 or something.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I loved it. I thought it was just so well done. And I've seen some of the older ones. While I find it interesting because I like history of Alcoholics Anonymous, I like that whole thing. This one was really, I don't know, it had an added something to it that
Hmm.
just I really enjoyed. And I think that, talking about some of these pioneers and some of these folks who really paved the way reminds me so much of, and when I say the way, I'm not trying to preach Alcoholics Anonymous, but paved a way in a struggling, brand new kind of fellowship. We're talking like the 1930s. So
Yeah.
this was a long time ago, and it wasn't very popular to get sober back then. It wasn't really
Mm-mm.
a thing. And so they were really searching for ways to do it because a lot of people had been told that they were hopeless. That's what Dr. Silkworth told Bill Wilson, that he was hopeless. And then Roland H., who is supposedly known as alcoholic number 3, his psychiatrist was actually Carl Jung. And Carl Jung had told Roland that he was hopeless. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think at that time, it's when something is brand new and you're told you're hopeless, it's like you're desperate to try anything, to see if there's any kind of a cure for this thing. And so I think they were very brave. All of them were very brave to really keep the thing rolling along in whatever capacity. And it was kind of an old boys club at the beginning. So that's impressive to me that Marty, who I don't hear of very often. So I would love to read that book that you are
Oh.
reading.
Mm-hmm.
She seems like a bit of a whippersnapper just from the
Mm-hmm.
small bits and pieces I've gathered. I've heard
Mm-hmm.
her on a few recordings, and I'm like, I think I would like her. She just kind
Mm-hmm.
of seemed to have that kind of Madonna-esque, like, I'm gonna just upset the apple cart just a little tiny bit. And and so I think it's fascinating. I think it's courageous. And I don't know why, but this keeps coming up for me. It's like synchronicity or something. I just have to throw in there how, without getting on this total tangent about the traditions, and I don't want to make this like a big old AA thing, so I apologize, but how this has worked for so long for many people blows my mind. And I know that many things work for people to get sober, but this in particular has a real interesting magic to it that my
Mm-hmm.
mind is constantly blown by, simply because I don't really know of any other organizations that operate as smoothly and have, quote, rules, unquote, that so many can agree upon and still function. I haven't really seen that before. And so I'm constantly enamored by the concept of it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, sorry to just get off on that sidebar, but yeah, it seems like, I guess, hey, if you get sober and you're in rehab, and maybe the person that you're potentially dating is going to get sober in rehab, and maybe you can grow and learn together, and maybe you can't. And I just thought it was interesting how, okay, there's a rehab romance that sort of worked out. And you never know, but I certainly wasn't going to be taking on I was not going to leave rehab a throuple. That would not have been an option for me or for my husband. So I was too,
Well,
I
and I went to an all women's rehab. So
mm-hmm,
yeah. Yeah.
mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. So yeah, those options are sort of limited unless, you want to try something new, which is always a possibility. That's what they say, right? Try new things, right? Drive home from the meeting a different way. Who knows? But yeah, the other thing that I thought was just so interesting was the author talks about in the book how she lied to a lot of people about some elements in her background.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And like,
Or didn't correct people that made assumptions.
there you go.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. I have definitely done that. If people assume things and it's the assumptions are too my positive, I'm like, maybe I'll correct them, maybe I won't. I don't know.
We're just going to go with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Um, but on a larger level, what that sort of got me thinking about, and as this conversation has also gotten me thinking about, is the non-linear paths that many of us can take to sobriety and to a new life and to new opportunities or different opportunities. It's just incredible to me how few people I know have had a linear path. And I think it's just important to point that out too, is that, if one thing is never the cookie cutter same, it is definitely our journeys getting sober. They may have similar threads, but you start listening to people's stories and you can relate for sure, or at least I can relate. And then it's like, man, wow, I just don't know how she did that, or I don't know how he did that. And the reason this topic keeps coming up for me is I've been having a lot of conversations with my teens recently. Pardon me, my young adults. And we've been talking about,
Wait, are we not allowed to call them teens anymore?
no, I think we are. It's just mine
Okay.
kind of almost barely qualify as teens anymore because I have one who's 19 and then one who's
Oh,
17, and then the
yeah.
rest are older. The rest, the other two. Um, but we've been talking about what happens after college, or what happens next in life after high school, or what's next? How do people get these jobs is kind of the conversation we've been having. And so we've been talking a lot about just picking a starting place.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that you have to pick today what you want to do for the rest of your life feels very overwhelming, but I don't know. It just rarely seems that that is the case, at least in the circle of folks that I generally have associated with as of late. Nothing has seemed very cut and dry and clearly foraged, right? It seems like one choice leads to another choice that maybe leads to, oh, and then I met this person who told me about this job that they were doing, and they brought me along, and I could sort of see what they were doing, and I was really interested. But I felt guilty because I was throwing away my education, or I thought I was, or this was not my field at all. And so today, this afternoon, actually, we went down to my husband's work. I had this idea that I wanted my kids to go before sort of a panel, if you will, but not really a panel. We sort of met individually with a few different people. And we just wanted to hear, hey, what was your journey like? How did you get from college or wherever you stopped your education to here? What was your
Mm-hmm.
path?
Mm-hmm.
And it was fascinating to hear the different risks people
Mm-hmm.
took, the different opportunities that unfolded based on very small chances that those opportunities would unfold. But they were little things like a conversation, or little things like, I saw on my first day of that company that I was not going to gel with that culture, and I knew it. And so just learning to follow those inner leadings and inner guidances and looking for what the next step was. I'm here to tell you, before I got sober, like, this was not a thing, like, for me. It was not a thing. I wouldn't have cared. I wouldn't have had the capacity to care. I didn't really know who I even was anymore. And so I say this big thing to just bring it back to, without a program of sobriety and recovery in my life, whatever that is, I'm just not sure that I would be, people use that term, and I use the term living my best life, quote unquote, but I really don't think I would be. I mean, I wouldn't have the capacity. And so, there are some surprises even at the end of Stash that I was like, oh, wow, well, that's a very mature way to handle one's life and one's custody arrangement. And, I thought, well, shit, why not? Because anything is possible with sobriety. Like, anything is really possible. And I forget that. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think some of these radical things or circuitous paths, it's like that's where the great stuff is, right? That is where the spiritual juice, whatever is going on spiritually, presents itself. And I was really moved by that, and I have been moved by that recently. I'm just trying to pay a little bit more attention to those connections in my own life.
Yeah. I, again, not to give anything away, but I've never been married. So I don't understand the whole going through a divorce process, but I understand a breakup. It's very different than a divorce. I have not been through that, but the way that this played out in the book, especially the attorney that she had, and all the things that that attorney was trying to make her do, which were supposed to be in her best interest, right? That's what, and how that all played out. Again, I don't want to say too much because I want everybody to go read this book for themselves. But I found that storyline was also really interesting to me, and the different twists and turns that it took, and then how it ended up. Because in the end, I think Laura was definitely she was not motivated by money. She was motivated by what's the right thing to do. It's a lot easier, at least for me, to figure out the right thing to do when I don't have substances or alcohol in my body. Because once I put those things in my body, I am great at all the wrong things to do.
Very well said.
Yeah.
Very well said. And I'm just kind of wondering too, like, as we begin to wrap it up, and by begin, I could mean like we talk for another hour and a half. Just kidding. But I would love to, if you don't mind, and I'm kind of putting you on the spot just a little bit, but if you wouldn't mind sharing some highlights, if you will, from your time at your recent job to now you have a totally different, when I say job, I mean career, you know what I'm saying? Big girl
Yeah.
for Amy. But you are now on a different path that still supports the skill sets that you had at your other job, and it utilizes them differently. And I think that means that you were open and willing enough, as one of the gifts of sobriety, right, to be able to be attuned to following some of those leadings. So I was just wondering if you wouldn't mind kind of talking a little bit about that.
Yeah. I've had a big splashy career, which I didn't have before I got sober. Before I got sober, I just sold advertising. That's what I did because I have the gift of gab. I'm good at talking people into things. I can spin a story like no other, right? And when I got sober, that was still the job that I had, and I've had a really big and fun career. But just the other day I was thinking, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be right now. And I'm comfortable in my own skin, even if there's a little extra that I would like to lose, right? But I'm still comfortable in it. Like, I'm comfortable with who I am. I'm actually really comfortable being single for the first time. I have been single my whole adult life for the most part, but I've never been comfortable with being single. I have habitually been always going on that, looking for that last first date. And I've done all the dating sites, like way back from when they started, like eHarmony when I was in my early 20s. I was on it way back then. So, but like, I am just really comfortable. And when I left working at a TV station a year ago. It's been a year now, which is wild.
Man.
That went by in a blink.
Yeah,
And I'm working for a man who is also in recovery, which is wildly rewarding in and of itself because we speak the same language. I think it's safe to say that when you are in the recovery community, there is a certain way we communicate with each other. And I mean, we can get right to the heart of some real deep stuff within 3 seconds of meeting each other, because it's just kind of built into what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, so it's wildly rewarding to have that safety around me. But we've been practicing a lot of intentionality in the workplace. And so, as a 12-step person who actively works a program, not perfectly, I would like to add, I work it perfectly, imperfectly. And, the funny thing about recovery, and I'm sure you can relate to this with the amount of time you have too, is, it ebbs and flows. There's times where you're like really doing the deal and you're doing all the things and you're going all the places and you're saying all the things and you're doing all the things. And then there's other times where you're not really doing a lot, but things are going okay and you're just kind of rolling with it. I think they call that resting on our laurels, but it's kind of easy and there's not too much drama, because life, in many ways, getting sober makes your life a lot easier, less drama, not as complicated, right? at first it's messy. There's a lot of cleanup that needs to happen, but eventually, around 5 or 6 years, like you're not making the same extraordinary messes you were making before you got sober. You're making some new messes, but so for me in the last year, I've had to look at what's changed, what's different. And it's the fact that I'm bringing intentionality into my day job and not just on the nights and evenings and weekends, right? It's in every part of my day now. Again, not perfectly, but I was thinking the other day how usually I'm a person who struggles with some mental health issues, specifically around depression, which tends to get worse in the winter months. And so I always try to strategically take a couple trips to warm places during the winter, because as you know, up here in the Pacific Northwest, it's dark and rainy. And actually, we're just saying that because we don't want any more people to move here. But but somehow I got through this last winter and I didn't even take any kind of a dip. If I did, it was like 2 days. Like it was nothing compared to like in the past, I would have maybe been 2 or 3 weeks in a depression, And I was like, well, what's different besides the fact that you don't work in a corporate world anymore, and besides the fact that you live in a new house and you're out in the burbs, like, but what's really different? And the only thing different is like how I'm showing up for me every day. And I'm doing all these things, we're taking the improv class. I'm writing a book now. And I'm talking about writing a book in part because that'll keep me going, because I have an ego, and I'm not writing a book to have it published and be famous. Be cool if that happens, be super cool, but that's not my motivation. I just know that I've got this story in me I need to get out. And then what happens after that, I'm not, I'm only partially going to be responsible for. We'll let it do what it's going to do. But like, I'm doing all those things. I'm really doing all those things that I used to talk about doing, but not doing. And for the first 10 years of my recovery, it was just about survival, right? It was just about survival. But now it's like, okay, I've survived a lot of things. And you and I, we've survived heart issues. We've survived some pretty horrific health issues in recovery too, right? And so I'm on the other side of that, and I'm done just surviving. I'm ready to thrive. And so this practice of intentionality, and really, my boss Dan says you can't win your life if you can't win your day. Right. And so, and if you, and we live in a world right now that is so distracting. Everything is a 10-second swipe in any direction. Right. And I'm not just talking about dating anymore. I'm talking about how we consume content. I mean, everything has gone to this TikTok swipe, swipe, swipe mentality. Right. And if you're not paying attention, it just flies right by and you don't even know what you spent the last month doing. So you have to practice having intention, right? And choosing what you want to do and how you want to spend your time and who you want to spend it with. And I think coming out of COVID and crashing right into a recession, I at least I knew that the time during COVID in launching the Sober Curator and doing some things like that, like I wanted to feel really good about that time. So when I look back, I could say, I used that bonus time wisely, right? And I really think I did. But now it's like, now that we're back out into the world again, I don't want to just survive anymore. I want to thrive, and I want to go after all those things that I always said I was going to do, even though some of them are scary. And quite honestly, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? I'm going to fail. Cool. I'm going to learn something. I learn more from my failures than I ever win from my victories, right? Always. So I don't know if that answers your question, Amy, but
yeah.
The layers of recovery, they don't stop. There's not a destination that anybody gets to. And we do get little plateaus of being comfortable. And then you either level up or you spiral down. That's kind of, at least that's been my experience. And so I just keep choosing to keep leveling up and throwing even more into my recovery. And, we talk a lot about 12-step when you and I get on the mic, and we're big proponents of that, but I'm big proponents of a lot of things. I'm big proponents of working out and yoga and meditation and therapy and art therapy and health and wellness. Like, there are so many things a person needs to do to feel complete and whole. And at the end of the day, we're all damaged people. We all feel like we're different. but really we have more things in common than not.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And I just have two things I want to do. First of all, is I want to comment on a book that I am reading called The Spirituality of Imperfection. And at the beginning, it starts with using baseball as an analogy, that the expectation in a baseball game or in a baseball player, the expectation is failure. And occasionally they get, oh, I made it to first base, or, that was a great hit. But more often than not, you see people striking out and, being sent back to the dugout and all of this. And it's like, yeah, that is life. Occasionally something massively like flashy and glittery and exciting happens, but the day-to-day like swinging the bat and practicing, and baseball games are really long, let's admit that. Oof, hard for me to watch.
Long. Little League
right?
Little League is rough.
Oh man,
I'm so glad to be past Little League years. Oh, that was
right?
rough.
Right?
It's never ending.
Never ending. But, my point in that is like, I feel like because that is like, let's say that is the expectation for my life. Well, yes, I can reframe what failure is, right? And I can call it something else, and that's fine. But if I start to expect that, like, it's the glitter that I'm going to find in the little things every day. It's, these little connections and synchronicities, and going from one career to a seemingly totally different career, and yet it's not, because you can see all of those threads, that you had from one career to a next, and they totally connect and you can use them. And also now you're doing all this other stuff that you may not have even thought was ever going to be a part of your life. Maybe you couldn't even conceptualize it. And I love that has happened too, that your skill set, which was already robust, is now, there's more, but wait, there's
more for an additional
right?
$9.95. You too.
And you get the Ginzu knives, like, as a bonus. But I love that whole idea. And I love that you just don't know what's around the corner. And of course, I'm going to finish on We Must Discuss the Wham documentary, not at length, but I got to bring it back to George and Andrew, because I mean, one theme that everybody kept asking in all this old footage that they had on the documentary, oh, well, now that George Michael is going to have a solo career, like, they're asking Andrew, do you feel sort of sidelined? Do you feel left out? Do you feel like there's nothing left for you? And it was like, no, he didn't feel that way. He was excited for his friend. He was excited for his friend to become the full version of who he was, personally and professionally, because during those times, people didn't really come out of the closet when they were in a place of fame, and it was just a different time. And so to be able to be so supportive of somebody else's success, like, that was glitter for Andrew. That was the glitter, and what gave him excitement, of course, was Wham for those 4 years, but also was for his own life to take a different turn and a different path, and to be right there and be George Michael's biggest supporter as his career in songwriting grew, and as he became a solo artist and all of this. And I gotta say that reading Stash made me realize, which is so like no duh, but also profound to me at the same time, it reminded me that even in our captivity of our addictions, we will feel that glitter again. We will see those connections and synchronicities again if we're looking for them, and if we are exposing ourselves to that, taking calculated risks, and knowing who we are. And I just think, for me personally, I can't do any of that stuff without recovery. And so I loved reading her journey of recovery and everything that she experienced, which was like a crucial part of, like, it's another breadcrumb that leads to like this big old, I want to call it a dump cake for some reason. It's a 70s thing. Look it up. You put all this, yeah, you know what I'm talking about, those dump cakes. But it is true that things unfold, they lead to the next thing. And it's kind of magical, I think, at least for me. And so I don't know if you wanted to comment on Wham before we go, but I mean, who doesn't want to comment on Wham? Are you through the documentary?
I mean, wake me up before you go. I am not all the way through. I watched a good hunk of it, and I was watching it on a Sunday afternoon, which is my dedicated nap time. So I have a little bit more to finish. Not probably about 20 minutes left.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I love that. Wake me up before you go. On that note, I really appreciate your time today, Alysse, because I feel as if I have woken up before I sign off on this podcast and go, but I will very strongly suggest to anybody looking for a great Quitlet book that you pick up Stash or turn it on the audiobook.
Definitely pick up Stash. Yeah.
It was fabulous. We both loved it. And I mean, coming from us, I don't know, it's pretty good.
We have excellent taste.
Like, we really do.
Yeah. Like, if you're still listening at this point, then you like us enough. And I can assure you that even though Amy and I don't always make sense, because we tend to rabbit hole here and there and up and down and left and right, like, we still have really good taste. And this is a great book. This is a great book. Yeah.
On that note, be kind, rewind. Thank you for the honor of your time, and take what you like and leave the rest behind.
Thank you so much for listening to Eternally Amy, a mum of eight's journey from jail to joy. Amy Liz Harrison is a best-selling author, speaker, 12-step coach, meditation teacher, and recovery advocate. To find out more, please visit amylizharrison.com. You can keep up with Amy on all platforms by following @AmyLizHarrison. Please subscribe and review this podcast. It means so much to us if you do.